Darmok. The crew struggles to deal with aliens whose method of communication is incompatible with the Universal Translator.
The Enterprise is responding to a signal sent out by the Children of Tama, a relatively unknown race that no one has been able to figure out how to communicate with.
Picard has that sweet jacket. I'm just going to point that out.
Yeah, I said he was dressed like a space biker.
Previous contact was attempted, but they were perceived as incomprehensible.
In my experience, communication is a matter of patience, imagination. I would like to believe that these are qualities that we have in sufficient measure.
It's good to know, going into our 5th season, that these characters still have not learned anything about themselves.
And of course, they're immediately stumped, and Data says the aliens are saying proper names and locations, but that's all he can really figure out.
I find it strange that they refer to them as the Children of Tama when they also just call them Tamarians, like they would with normal aliens. The main Tamarian reminded me of one of the dinosaurs from the Jim Henson show.
The main Tamarian, who is their captain, is played by Paul Winfield, who was a captain in The Wrath of Khan. He's one of the ones that got those slugs in his ears, and I also recognized him from The Terminator.
Well, how do I look?
Like shit, boss.
Yo, mama.
Picard does that thing where, in order to be more clear to someone who doesn't understand a language, you speak really loudly.
Captain, would you be prepared to consider the creation of a mutual non-aggression pact?
And he makes even more of a dumbass of himself by immediately jumping into long sentences involving complex ideas that the aliens are obviously not going to understand, and even ends with that dumb little smirk.
The Tamarians start arguing amongst themselves, and their captain pulls out 2 knives and says,
Darmok and Gilad at Tanagra,
before beaming himself and Picard to the surface of a planet below.
And the Enterprise is unable to beam Picard back because the Tamarians have set up an interference field.
But they can still monitor what's happening.
The alien captain apparently wants Picard to fight him, but he refuses, and the two end up just hanging out on the planet. And Picard keeps attempting verbal communication. I know they have their universal translators or whatever, but why would they expect this other race to be able to translate English? Unless it somehow works both ways.
Up above, Riker's still trying to communicate, and decides to send a shuttle to the planet. And at one point, Data says,
Is there any way to get through to them?
Not without further study.
which is a good idea, but of course is shut down.
When the Tamarian captain gets ready for bed, he sets little metal things around and seems to perform some kind of ritual. After lying down, he sees that Picard is cold and tosses him a burning branch from his campfire, saying,
Timber, his arms wide.
I thought it was really funny that Picard sucks at starting his own fire for being captain of the flagship. Up above, the shuttle is approaching the planet, but the Tamarians fire on them and force them to return to the Enterprise.
Enough to turn them back, but not enough to hurt them.
Yes, sir.
Geordi says he might have a way to transport Picard back, but it will take him a full day to set things up. And throughout the entire episode, Worf just wants to blow them up.
Data says, again,
There's got to be some way to get through to them.
As I have said, with further study, it may be possible.
Then do it. Deanna, help him. I want something by 0900 hours.
why have they not done anything like this yet while they're waiting? We've seen this before, and it's still stupid here.
When Picard wakes up, the Tamarian captain is gone, but he has left behind some artifacts.
Including a book. Data and Troy are looking at the initial transmission to dissect what the Tamarians were talking about, and they do a very simple Google search and find that 2 of the words are related to each other, and that gives them a jumping off point.
You would think they would have thought of that a long time ago.
Yeah. On the planet, the Tamarian captain runs up to Picard, followed by a mysterious roaring, and the Enterprise detects something moving towards both of them.
The signal approaching Picard keeps going in and out, and Riker urges Geordi to hurry his ass up. And then Picard and the Tamarian encounter a teleporting predator.
Picard finally figures out that the Tamarians communicate by metaphor, right as they're attacked by the Power Rangers villain.
Now you shall taste my firepower!
Picard tries to go along with the aliens' plan for fighting the monster, but the Enterprise interrupts by attempting to beam him out. The attempt fails, and he ends up staying down on the planet, but by the time he's freed from the transporter beam, the Tamarian has been seriously wounded and the monster is gone.
Riker is even more pissed and wants to attack the Tamarian ship to disable their scattering field.
Geordi leaves to try to figure out how to get through their shields, and Data, Troy, and Beverly explain to Riker that the Temerians communicate via references to images of events.
But since they don't know the stories the Temerians are referencing, they still can't communicate effectively.
Down on the planet, Picard tries to communicate some more, and we get a good look at the Temerians' dumb thumbs that reminded me of the Benzites.
Picard gets more of the story of Darmok.
He realizes the story relates to their situation, and tells the Temerian the story of Gilgamesh, which also relates to their situation. He doesn't mention when Gilgamesh joined the Avengers, though.
Yeah, he also forgot to mention when he did a cameo in Final Fantasy IX. And while he's telling the story, the Temerian captain dies.
The next day, the Enterprise prepares to attack the Temerian ship, and the monster begins approaching Picard. And they beam him on board right before the monster makes a comical lunge at him.
As the Temerians are returning fire, Picard runs to the bridge and manages to effectively communicate what happened down on the planet.
Using way more of their metaphors than it seemed he actually had learned.
He was just happy that he figured it out. He wanted to, flex those storytelling muscles.
Yeah, what if he had used the wrong one and they had been like, oh shit, he's saying that he's...
You and the captain did what? Oh, that's disgusting!
Maybe he was learning all night, I don't know. But it seemed pretty ridiculous that he would understand so much already.
I disagree. Picard delivers the Temerian captain's book, and they leave in peace.
Later, Riker visits Picard in his ready room, where he muses about the Temerian willing to sacrifice himself for the sake of achieving communication with another race.
He's probably so incredulous because he could never see himself doing that. Darmok. Overall?
I know a lot of people like this episode.
Including me, I'm going to point out.
I found it to be pretty tedious. I like the idea behind trying to figure out the language of another race, but I feel like it's been handled much better in other places, like the movie Arrival or the book Project Hail Mary, which I realize came out after this episode, but I saw this episode a long time ago and I remember feeling the same way back then. I feel like the language as presented doesn't make sense anyway, given that this is a race that has achieved space travel. They would have to have a better form of communication to achieve such technical feats, and they seem pretty stupid to expect other races to understand their references to things that the other races wouldn't be familiar with. Picard didn't handle things any better with his stupid way of talking nonstop instead of trying to start with individual words or ideas. I did like that they didn't explain the weird monster, which was pretty goofy sometimes. I thought this felt like an original series episode, and it reminded me a bit of Arena and the movie Enemy Mine, which I've referenced before, and I feel like it would have worked better in the original series. I give it a C-.
Interesting. I'm going to disagree with you on this one. I gave it a B+. The idea is so unique, and I really liked it. This is definitely one of the more memorable episodes for me. The scenes on the planet and the interactions between the Temerian captain and Picard were good, and played out much more naturally than what happened on the ship, and I'm going to get to that. I feel like the parts on the planet are the parts of the episode people really remember, although that monster looked like shit. On the other hand, basically everything the crew did on the ship was really dumb. I understand there's a gap in understanding, but it's almost like they went out of their way to purposely make it more difficult for themselves. Their arrogance at the beginning of the episode that it would be so easy for them to communicate even though others have already tried and failed, and then giving up so easily after they can't do it within the first 10 seconds was almost comical, and the only method anyone on the ship used was loud talking. What about visuals, hand gestures, body language, charades, anything we as humans do to more effectively communicate with each other? And Data repeatedly saying, hey, maybe we should study what the other people are actually saying instead of just getting angry about everything was really annoying. It took them way too long to follow a very logical course of action just to give people on the ship something to do. And then even after Dana and Troy tell everyone they know how to communicate, they don't follow it with the next logical step to actually communicate. They decide to shoot at them. I wish they had said what the next steps were for communicating with the Temerians. I imagine sending some sort of mythologist or folklorist. I thought that would have been cool. If half the episode wasn't people being dumb on the ship, I'd give this one a higher rating, definitely an A range. I really like this episode overall.